So just to kind of get things settled in here, my question to you is because I heard from a little birdie about some tunes that were being passed around a fire in Toronto,
Ah,
and I heard that you found out that I am also a big fan. So I would love to know what's your favorite John Fogerty song.
my favorite John Fogerty song. Oh Jesus. It's it's the one with the dancing spoon and elephants in the yard. Tell me what that is now.
I'm looking now. I know,
I'm
dancing
thinking, outside my back door. Ooh,
outside my. Oh,
ooh,
okay. Yeah.
looking out my back door. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, that's probably my favorite one. It
So
just paints a beautiful picture of coming home and relaxing, if we could leave it at that.
indeed. I
Yeah.
found myself really diving in to like his solo music, right? Outside of the time with CCR. Old Man Down the Road is a great one, but I have told our common friend Ryan that I believe that Rock and Roll Girls is one of the greatest songs ever created.
Wow, you're hardcore. Yeah. See,
And so that made
the outer Roll stuff as much, and honestly, the CCR stuff is just what I get from the Bush Party and the boat trips and the right. So you're probably a little deeper on that than I am.
you can't go wrong with some CCR out with good
Yeah,
friends and good times. Like
no,
it's always going to be.
or just driving at night, just driving along the road. That's gonna
Yep.
keep you bringing. Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Well, I heard you're a Fogerty fan, so I wanted to ask just
Yeah,
to make sure
that's
that we
awesome.
tied it up because we hadn't chatted about that
I'm a
previous.
music fan, like our mutual friend, like you are as well. I just love music.
Okay, Frank. Well, here we are. We are on Tide Talk. So excited for you to be here. And again, the premise that we talked about is how do we talk about our careers and the evolutions and use it as a real point to inspire the youth and to really uncover that life is not what it looks like on social media and like, you're gonna get beat up and it's gonna feel down at certain times, but it's through those scars and those those growth moments that we become who we are and we become people of great value. So everything that we're going to talk about today comes back to how do we disseminate our lessons in life and personal ambitions and really inspire the youth in a way that is in reality and not in the social media kind of
Yeah,
framing.
love it. Let's do it.
Today, we are joined by Frank Lombardo, Vice President of Information Technology and Digital Innovation at Marchedines, Canada. Frank brings more than 25 years of experience leading enterprise transformation and innovation initiatives across the public, private, and nonprofit sectors. Today, he's helping lead a multi-year strategy centered around ethical AI, scalable digital platforms, accessibility, security, and building sustainable systems that create measurable impact for people with disabilities. How does it feel to have your career summarized like that?
Well, that was great. That was probably the best one I've heard, and I'm really happy that all the other stuff about me isn't in there because it goes deep. It goes deep, but that really is a lot of what it is that I'm here to do. I would sit there and say most people don't put the most important stuff up top, which is how are we going to deploy these technologies to the benefit of act. And in my case, it's to the benefit of those with disabilities. And I was in meetings yesterday, some high level executive and board meetings yesterday, where I start talking about how it's going, how these emerging technologies and innovations are going to benefit people, and it's the only thing that excites me. There's very little in technology that actually blows me away, but when you look at how you can take tech and actually benefit individuals that are marginalized or just don't have access, or that's what it's for. That's what it's always been about, for me at least. That's why I got into it. And so I'm happy to see that there are organizations making that play, and I'm contributing to that. And that's what gets me up in the morning. So good
It's really
summary. Yeah.
That's exciting. And I think, what a time to be alive and a time to be in the humanitarian space and thinking about how technology is no longer the barrier to a lot of the things that it was the barrier to not too far ago. And I think thinking about how we can steal from our commercial experience, bring it into the nonprofit space, and really use technology to support people across all the different mission driven organizations that we have in front of us. But I'm really bullish and excited because I believe it's a true equalizer right now between the sector that we play in and other commercial sectors who typically lead innovation. And I'm really excited around how nonprofits can start to harness this and to start to become the leaders of in innovation, which I think is something a bit newer towards the sector. I think how would you kind of gauge?
When we think about AI, when we think about what's potentially coming because it's murky for a lot of people, right? I think there's a play here potentially that, let's just take a very simple, oversimplified example. Nobody needs to work anymore. The whole thing's been turned upside down. The construct is different. How do we define value? And maybe there's a space for people in social service and nonprofits and social service to actually be the value generators, because there'll always be, even if you have the most utopian sort of future, there's always going to be those that are marginalized somehow. There's always going to be those that suffer from mental health crises, or that have needs that are beyond the norm. And maybe the nonprofits of today are actually going to be the valuable organizations of the future, because everything else that's commoditized is just going to be handled by the bots, right? So that's where I'm sort of thinking about it. Yes, technology's blowing away barriers, and it's going to continue to do so, I think. But I want to think about, what happens after that? Like, who becomes important in this new world? And as we get into talking about, from a youth perspective, I want them to start thinking about what's going to be important in that new world. Because just to get it up front, like, I've got two high school teenage kids. One's about to get into mechatronics and robotics engineering, and what is that going to mean 10 years down the line? And what's that going to enable, maybe even for people with disabilities? So, yeah, we'll
What
start.
I hear you saying too is like, let's not just be thinking about the forefront of what we're going to do right now, but we want to be influencing the future, not just be a product of it. And if you're
Exactly.
not in the game and thinking about it, then you're just going to be handed what the future is rather than being, hopefully prepared for what's coming.
Well, and that's why I like saying these things like everywhere I go, because it gets other people saying, and they tell two friends, and everybody starts to sort of echo this notion that maybe nonprofits are the future value generators, because they're taking care of all the gaps and all the things that humanity is going to have to endure through this transformational age that we're in, right? I think this is an important thing for people to hear. I think I have a good example of something profound. My job didn't exist when I was like 18 years old, right? There were no corporate IT guys. It was you were a comp sci guy, you were back in the mainframe, you had your pocket protector and because and white shirt and glasses, and you worked for IBM. My job didn't exist. I was lost at 18 years old, probably a few years after that, until this innovation made its way, matured to the point where there was a desktop, there was a PC on every desk, and you had to connect all those things, and things started moving faster. So you had to be able to think fast. You had to be able to problem solve. You had to be dynamic. I have a business education. I'm an outdoorsman. My father is very classical in his upbringing, and so I got to learn all sorts of things that you don't get in school, and all of that sort of culminated. It was available to me. Here's what it is: it was available to me when the future presented itself. Right? That's how I see it. The job didn't exist when I was 18, 19, and it was around the early 20s where it was like, oh, I could get a job doing this, these Microsoft certifications, and start to connect to people and start to, help people build the future. And so that was pretty profound when I look back on that. Yeah.
Lots to unpack there. You dropped a phrase I think is really important, but I'm going to go to that secondary, which is I think for anyone listening today, the jobs of the future don't exist. What our youth will be doing in 10 to 20 years doesn't exist today, just like it didn't exist for you. But what I heard is that I often describe people often say, "Oh, you're so lucky to have done this." I view luck as when preparation meets opportunity. And what I heard you say is you were preparing. You didn't know what the future. It was very ambiguous for you at the time. But what you were preparing for is kind of the soft skills and the other areas of, hey, how am I going to show up and be a great human being? And then how do I take advantage of the opportunity? Do you view, opportunity and luck is really just preparation meeting opportunity? Or how can you kind of uncover where you were at mentally that allowed you to put yourself in a state to be as prepared as you could for an unknown job in front of you? I know that's a hard question, but
Yeah, that's a tough one. That's a tough. I can only reflect on myself, right? Like, I was always very dynamic in the people that I hung out with, right? I didn't cling to any one group. I wanted to be part of all the different sort of cliques that were out there. I enjoyed bringing them together. So there's probably something in that that lends to my capabilities. I was listening to another podcast and talking about how you become valuable. Well, if you can couple different ways of thinking together, if you have different skills that you can bring together in a unique way, if you can stay broad, right? Specialization, I'm wondering where specialization is going to be in so many years. But if you can stay broad, and one of the things that I'm talking to my youngsters about is, hey, don't close any doors. Like, learn as much as you can, broaden that palette, so that when that's the preparedness, so that when the opportunity presents itself, you've got most of the tools that you need. But those are social tools, academic tools, physical tools. Probably my biggest shortcoming was I didn't prepare physically to be as healthy as I could be. That's my regret. Not that I'm unhealthy, but I probably could have done more to not have a sore back at my age. But you take all of those things and you say, okay, like whatever the future brings, I'm ready. If the future is, me just receding into the countryside, I know how to grow. If the future is somehow technology related, that stuff is not beyond me, right? And so that I think is that preparedness and opportunity. That's the luck. I don't
Yeah.
believe luck. I do believe in I do believe in honesty, so that when the opportunities come around, they're very clear to you, and you're very clear in how you can take advantage of.
I love it. I want to unpack a few things that you said there for hopefully the youth who are able to take away some like actual tangible things from our conversation today, which is number one. I learned this maybe at a later age, and I think it's a challenging thing you go through as a youth. But you truly are the product of like the five people that you spend the most time with,
Yeah,
right? And I think as you grow from a youth into a young adult, you get the opportunity to start to define who you hang out with because your parents become less of in your top five, right? As
right.
much parents we want to be in the top five forever, and that's a unique opportunity, especially if you're in school right now, is to do an audit. Even if you're not going to make any changes, I don't think you and I are saying we're not saying go alienate all your current friends, but take stock of who you spend time with, how they influence both your physical state, your health, as you talked about, how they influence your mental state, and are you surrounding yourself with people who are growing in whatever direction that you're hoping to grow in? Or you just want to be surrounded with people who have that type of growth mindset because it's so easy to become stagnant or, the easy thing is to not be in growth mode and have a mindset of that. But I think that's something that I wish I would have learned earlier in life, which
Yeah.
is not necessarily to think about throwing out your friends, but just think about who are the five people you spend the most time with and are you okay with their influence on who you're going to become?
Yeah, it was probably the biggest, best piece of advice my dad ever gave me was hang out with people that have something to offer you in the way of being a better person, or in the way, if you want to be good at business, hang around good business people. If you want to be a creative person, hang around creative people. But don't hang around people that, they have nothing to offer you. And that's a bit selfish, but I'll say in a hopefully a respectful way, relationships are a selfish thing. We don't hang out with people to benefit them. If we do, I think there's a problem there. I think we create communities and we hang out with people because it gives us something. Well, if what it's giving you is hurtful and painful, you got to deal with that. And why not hang out with people that give you things that are better? And so I made a point of, really trying to connect with people that I thought had something I didn't have, that I could aspire to be like them in some sort of way. And they've all benefited me. And then there's the flip side of that, which is you have to give back. You have to be a good friend. You have to be reliable. Relationships, as you know, and I will say, to the end, to my dying breath, relationships are everything. They're everything to me. I will not fail in life because of the people that I've done good by, and those that have done good by me. Like, this is how we get together. Nobody gets out of this alone, So
It's like you're reading my talking notes here, Frank, because you said a word that goes, I think how our conversations go, but it goes to the next piece. It's tangible things for the youth that they can take away from when we're kind of talking about your and my past experience, which is number one, who you hang out with, right? And creating it should be an equal value relationship where you create value, they create value, you support each other. It's a two-way street. But then you said number two, the second point that I wrote down here that I was going to move us to, which is community. And I think if you can develop and be the person, I've been doing a lot of research on this lately, and it starts at kids when we're very young, and it contributes to when you get into adulthood. But if you can be the type of person who is willing to take on the little bit of responsibility that creates community, that is a skill set that I think you and I are probably always looking to hire people who have that ability to create that type of connection and sense of community. And I want to go one step further to talk about a tangible example of how community can change your career trajectory.
Right.
What I mentor a really close friend of mine. In his career, he's about 10 years younger than me, and he worked at a big enterprise software organization, had a really great job, got in as like a BDR, grinded the sales route. And then what he started was a golf outing, quarterly golf outing for all of the sales division.
Right. Awesome.
People in around that company, I'm trying to be very generic here for obvious reasons. People around in other companies saw that this person was creating community, and it brought together like 70 salespeople. Well, he just got poached out of that enterprise company to join a smaller partner in that space because they saw him, one, as the ability to do great sales work, but they saw that he has this intangible on top of it, which is you took it upon yourself to create, like, at a multi-billion dollar enterprise, a little golf outing just to create community, and now they're setting up little challenges among their partner community. So, and he didn't, this is not my idea. This was his idea. He ran with it, and it's incredible. But he just saw a career trajectory by taking on something that he loved, which is golf, creating a community with his colleagues so that he could get out of the office and experience things together. And now his whole world is changing because he took on the responsibility of creating community. And I just wanted to share that because I think you resonate with that. And I think that's a skill set that, as the youth, that does not require bachelor's degree, schooling, or anything, right, to create a sense of community. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think I had a thought in my head and it kind of disappeared because as you talk, it's like a million thought. This is how we do. But I think that what's really critical there, or important there, is that it, if you look at the trajectory we're on, this is what I wanted to get to. I have this concept called the pendulum. You can apply it to anything social where we swing one way and then we swing another. And we know we're swinging in this direction of isolation. We're swinging in the direction of segregation. I don't know if I like that because I was raised, I'm a product of the 70s, and I was raised with this idea that we're all one and we should be integrated, not segregated, and all these things. And here we are isolating and segregating. If so, what's going to be important in the coming years are those there's going to be people, the pendulum is going to start to eventually swing the other way where they're going to be looking for that need, that inherent human need to come together, right? And we're starting to see it in pockets of youth where they're abandoning. I saw this group of kids walking down the street yesterday. I went for a walk. They were walking down the street yesterday. They were listening to Dire Straits, blew me away, and they were just listening to music, walking down the street talking. So, that's hopeful. And I think that that's the point, is that we've come out of COVID, we've come out of these things. We put ourselves in positions where very much isolated and segregated to some extent. And I think there's going to be a need to bring that back because there is no better feeling than knowing your tribe and having that tribe, because in the hardest of times, that tribe is gonna rest you and make you smile again and give you something to look forward to. Every long weekend, that's a Canadian thing, but it's like your Memorial Day weekend, and every August long weekend, which is a fantastic. We have 10 families approximately. We all get together. We don't go do what everybody else is doing, and that has to survive. We always look at each other and say, "This has to survive," because it refuels us as people. All right, so yeah. And then everything else is easy because you've got that tribe with you. I love that sense of tribe.
Yeah, and "your vibe attracts your tribe," is a phrase I've often heard, and I think that that's really true because I think once you get this going, it's kind of like a snowball down a mountain, right? Once you start to dip your toe into this, like, creating community, you really can't quantify the impact of what that community will do, how they'll be there to support you at your lowest times, which is really when you need community more than anything else. But I just want to encourage the youth that I think they've done a lot of research to show that there are higher outcomes in both career and just your mental health if you are attaching and you don't have to always be creating it, but joining community as well. Community should be something that every human deserves to have a sense of community as well. And I think that's one thing is like, if you're hearing this and you're hearing Frank and I, know that you should be running towards whatever creates a sense of community for you. It can be two people, it could be 20 people, it could be anything it is, but we all need that sense of community. And I think it's more important now than ever.
It's a fundamental human requirement. I mean, there's just no other way to put it, and it is unhealthy to not have that in your life. Nothing else matters than to know you've got people. And you're right, it starts with family. And if you're as fortunate as I am to have a solid, loving family, that's taken care of. If you don't have that, you should, maybe be seeking that out in a positive way, because there are negative communities too. Let's just acknowledge that. And there are people that get connected to those things in a negative way. And, it's because the need exists, but they may not know what the alternative is, which is a very positive community. Everybody lifts everybody up and gets forward together.
100%. And then that kind of goes to the third thing that I took down when you were talking, which is staying broad as kind of an idea to think about. And I want to inject a little idea here. So I think we've talked about it. I come from like the CPQ world, configure price quote, very complex space between sales and finance. We don't always see data and process the same between those two divisions.
Yeah.
And, Frank, one of the things that was, and I'm just gonna be very like open here, is like it was very detrimental to my overall like confidence and just my idea of self-worth because I worked in very technical environments.
Right.
And if you're not the most technical person, it almost knocks you down the notches because historically in the last 15 years, it felt like your goal is to always be the most articulate, the most intelligent from a technical perspective. I always felt like I was held back because I wasn't a developer, although I could speak the language of coders and salespeople, which ultimately became my superpower. In the beginning, it felt like I just didn't fit into the typical boxes of are you very technical or are you a salesperson? I was like, well, I'm in the middle. So when you said stay broad, I thought that was so critical for the youth because there's a lot of value in being able to understand and speak to different divisions or different types of people. Let's just go very generic. If you can speak to a very technical person and you can speak to a salesperson, there is a skill set, and I will just tell you right there that is so valuable to create that connected glue. But have you ever felt that in terms of I'd love you to elaborate on staying broad because for me it really resonated because staying broad ultimately created the trajectory that I had. But
Yeah.
I was fighting that like it was a resistance to staying broad from my career up
So
until
I
relatively
never
recently.
had that complex, if you will, that you did, because I never wanted to be the ultimate like nerd, and I never wanted to be the businessman either. And so I kind of found my niche in the middle of that. So again, I had a business education. That was a parent pleaser. I had to go do something. I went and got a business education. But I used to take apart televisions and phones, and I had a technical aptitude, and so I had an interest there. So you find these different things that you're good at. But you're absolutely right. I mean, the first thing that I recognized when I was working on the service desk is that I was comfortable walking into the CEO's office and fixing his problem. And I remember one CEO, he's like, "Thank you, saved my. Here's a bottle of wine." I'm like, "This could be cool," right? And so just having that dynamic. And the other thing that's important to mention is when someone sits and says, we need somebody to do this, if you think for a second that you could do that, raise your hand and go do it. Whether you are successful or not in the task, you have put yourself out of your comfort zone. You've exercised muscles you didn't have before. You learned a little something about yourself. All those things are more valuable than the actual task at hand. And so, what have I done in my career outside of IT? I've run facilities, I've run contact centers, I travel. Like I'll do whatever. And I'll still get under the desk if I have to. I don't mind. And that's the broadness that makes you valuable, dynamic, useful at the end of the day. Also, to that extent, is that you get to choose where you want to go. So this notion of choice, like, I've had a number of career transitions in my life where I've had to look inwards, like, what do I want to do? Well, if all I could do was computer programming, I'm telling you, my options today would be very limited. Right? Anybody who's specialized, and what then it ties back to what we said earlier. We don't know what that future is going to be. If we were having this conversation 7 years ago, 6 years ago, what would we be telling young people? code. Wow. Well, that was a bad gamble. But I would rather tell them, understand logic. Know how to structure your thinking. Don't, get to know how these technologies work. I love quantum physics. Don't pay any attention to the mathematics. I understand the concepts so that when things start to emerge in science, it's like, oh, I get what he's saying. I don't need to know the math. And that's what's going to stand us up and be able to survive whatever's coming, is to have that broadness in thinking, knowledge, ability, etc.
Because that critical thinking and that broad knowledge will allow you to do what you talked about, which is you're most likely going to go through some pivots or some changes in your career. And if you go too specialized down one, it limits your ability to make those small pivots in your career. So the broadness also gives you opportunity or flexibility should you ever want to change kind of your venture as well, is what I'm hearing too.
And you have to get used to chaos, failure. Like those things are inevitable, and that's the problem. It's what I see. And again, I'm reflecting through my own kids at the moment, but when they're just in their electronic bubble, there's no risk to anything, and there's no chaos. And if you get really, really good at one thing and you do it for the rest of your life, you are missing out on some great experience, some of them not so great, but that end up being very beneficial to you in the long run. Even the worst times in my life, the most tragic things in my life have benefited me in retrospect.
Yeah.
And that's a conversation for another day. But I like to say to people, you don't know if something's good or bad in the moment. You can only make that determination down the road. So you might as well give it a shot, you know? Who knows how it'll turn out?
I
Yeah.
always say, why don't you just, I always tell myself this, Frank. Why don't you decide if going to the gym is worth it after you go to the gym?
Yeah.
And no,
Just
you know what, Frank? It's never not worth it. If I go do it, I'm always happy I did it. It's so funny how that works, with us human beings, and,
never left out saying, "Oh, I wish I hadn't have done that today." And if you actually, what it does is it gets you good at doing it. It gets you good at stepping out. And I've now come to this place in my life where if something doesn't work out as I expected, it kind of rolls off me because I know how to manage that failure or that chaos and move forward, and leave it behind you. And so that's a skill. I think there's a clip that I saw, like, I think it was Michelle Obama talking about how you're practicing for life.
mhm,
Everything you do is practice for life. And I love that. And I look back, I said, yeah, all these things that I did, I'm practicing for life.
I love that, and, it's one thing that I notice right now is that, and it took me forever. I would say maybe the last couple of years where I really started to adopt that. I love running towards failure, Frank.
Yeah.
'Cause I'm one step closer to knowing what the right answer is when I do fail, but the only thing you can't do is not make a decision, right? Because you know you're not going to arrive at any kind of end game if you don't make a decision, and I think we talked about this earlier on another call, but I have in my filing cabinet notes because I take notes, like, almost every day of what my day's work are, and I looked back, like, 8 years ago after our last chat, and I was looking through the flip notes that I have, and Frank, there were days where it was like I thought the world was ending.
Right.
Now I don't even know the context of what that note was on my notebook, and so, like, if there's one thing the youth I wish that they could take away is that failure is growth. It's not failure of you as a human being, and to your point, the more that you ebb and mold and you're able to take failure as learning and it's just another step forward, all the best things in my life have come out of failures. They haven't come out of like what you would deem the wins. And so I wish more people would, because I respect the hell out of it when someone says, "Oh, I messed up. Like this is incorrect. But now I'm gonna go do it right because I know the solution." Like true ownership of failures is a skill set as well that took
Yeah.
me many, many years and probably multiple decades of working.
What's great is when you get good at that, you recognize that you've done something wrong before anyone else gives you the opportunity to correct it. And like nothing ever happened. So I agree with you. Like where everybody makes mistakes. It's not the mistakes that define you. It's how you respond to them. It's how you deal with those mistakes. But how can you deal with them well if you don't make any? So we can get into like the fortune favors the bold, and the fact that you build strength, you build out of failure. Uh, at the end of the day, we are designed as human beings to take risks. We heal, We have brains that recover, you know, but all of those things take iteration. We do it in small bits. My daughter, many years, my oldest daughter, I used to be on top of them all the time. I care so much about them, always trying to make sure that they didn't make the mistakes. And I think she was 15, 16. So, Dad, maybe you should just let us fail. And boom, like just like, yeah, maybe that should just let you fail. Get to failing. You need to do it's time for you to start failing. If you break a bone, you'll heal. If you get hurt emotionally, you will heal.
Yep.
But you won't get good at that when it counts, which is when we're on our own and navigating this world. By then, you really got to have those muscles, right?
100%. And, yeah, because it doesn't get easier along this road, right? You just gotta get tougher and you wear the badges of this life experience. And I think when you were talking about that and we talk about running towards failure, one thing that helped me to, like, visualize my life as a youth was to look at the like, almost put my life in multiple pillars as if, like, pillars on the front of a house, like 4 or 5 of them. And one pillar is my work. One pillar is, my mindset, my
Yeah.
family, my intimate relationship, and then my sense of community. And one thing that's always been helpful for me, because I do a lot of mentorship, is to say, "Hey, take stock of your pillars. Which ones are solid?" People will say, "Oh, my family's good. I'm feeling good on my mindset, mental health right now, but my work is okay. My work is a little shaky." I'm like, "Okay, well, if you feel 4 of your 5 pillars are pretty strong, that's an indicator that it's okay to go into a risky situation with work, maybe look at a new opportunity."
Yeah.
But I've always tried to think about how to solidify other parts of your life if there are parts that you wanna work on, 'cause as humans, we need some semblance of predictability, if you will, just to maintain a
Yeah.
sanity. But I'm
Yeah.
curious if you've ever pictured your life in that sort of sense when you're thinking about working on a really big part of you. How have you kind of taken stock or gauge of the other parts of your life so that you can put the attention on a growth area, if that makes sense?
Yeah, this realization came probably, midway through my career when I was transitioning. But it's really important to recognize what you're strong at, what your natural aptitudes are, what your strong pillars are, and be very honest. I talked about that earlier, and that honesty is a self-honesty, and aware of what you're weak at. Because you don't have to if you keep working on the things that you're good at, you're not probably not going to get that much better at them because they're naturally good at them. But the things that you're weak at, the things that are problematic for you, focus on that, knowing that you got the other legs to stand on and fall down on it if you need to. And so that's where you should be putting your effort. I say that to my kids. I say that to everybody that I mentor. It's like, what do you feel is the hardest thing about X? Oh, well, it's my ability to communicate. Well, focus on that. Just everything else you've got. It's built in your DNA, but that's the one thing you feel you need that's not naturally inherent. That's if you don't have that muscle, you need to go work that muscle. So I think there's that. And I got to call it out. I think in this context, and only because I did a shout out to my dad and what he imparted on me. My mom gave me one good thing early on, which is what you have control over. And the only thing you've got control over, the only thing, in my opinion, and people will argue this with me, but I can always win this argument, is your attitude, right? And so you can choose to be like, I'm going to embrace fear, embrace failure, uh, but I know that that I'm gonna recover from it because I have everything I need to recover from that. I'm gonna take it a little bit at it. Like just your attitude is what you've got. Everybody's got that, and that's a choice. Your attitude is a choice. It's yours. It's the only thing you own 100%. Nobody can touch it. Nobody can take it away from you. Nobody's allowed to diminish it. That's your weapon. Choose your attitude. Go forward with it. You know.
I'm
Thanks,
not gonna
mom.
challenge you that that's the one you control, 'cause, I view this life as nothing is in control in this, wild experience that we're
No,
going through. But I
no.
agree, how you show up
How you
is
show
what
up,
you
all that
can
matters.
control, right? You can't control your environment, but you can control how you react to it. And so many people today, and this is a big, obviously, I think my roots with Tony Robbins, but he talks around how the same 2 people could walk down a hallway and have dramatically different experiences because they allow certain things to
Yeah.
upset them or to trigger them. And then the
Yeah.
next person can walk down the same aisle and not have the same experience. And so much of that's that piece that's in control. We can control how we respond and react to our thoughts and our environment. But that
Yeah.
is a muscle, to your point, that you got to
Because
evaluate.
it's training. You have to look yourself in the mirror. You have to remind yourself. You have to ask yourself. You kind of have to talk to yourself a lot. I think it's important. It's, people say, well, that sounds kind of weird. That's no, you got to talk to yourself. You have to have that inner conversation.
If you're not having the inner dialogue, I'm not sure that you've really started to uncover the next levels of
And
what
you're
this
just
life
listening
is.
to everybody else. Don't do that.
Yeah.
There is a voice inside everybody's head, and that voice has a purpose. And you need to find out what that is and work with it. I love the
So
little guy in my head. He keeps me level.
well, and but you've cultivated that his
Yeah.
muscle inside of you to be the right type of narrative, the right type. So, two things on this one. Number one, I can't recommend this enough. And again, I've gone through a lot of evolution here in the last couple of years, kind of referencing that. But how you talk to yourself, Frank, matters.
It does. The words you see, the word, and I tell this to everybody. Why would you say that? Why would you exaggerate that? Why would you make that a negative statement? Why that's not accurate. Why? Like, what you put out into the world, into the universe, in the way of your speech and your language. We talked about it earlier. Like, I want to promote certain ideas, so I talk to people about it, knowing that they can take root and they can progress through everybody else's thinking. This is this human sort of consciousness that we have. Why would you use negative words? People laugh and say, "Oh, there's Frank, the ultimate optimist." What's the point of not being an optimist
I can't figure it out either, Frank. I can't figure out when the pessimists say,
if we're not going to be optimistic? So let's put out optimistic stuff. And there is an unfortunate bombardment of negativity that comes through our media channels. But then there's, people like yourself that are doing things like this. Where am I going to go? I want to go here. I don't want to go there. That's ugly. You know?
the negative talk, Frank, has been something where, and I'm just going to give another real example for the youth. So I think here's one thing that happens in my house. Sometimes I get distracted, Frank, when I'm trying to do a chore and I'll hit my foot on a corner of a thing or run into a doorway. It happens more frequently than I'd like to admit. It's mostly because I'm on autopilot mode thinking about other things.
Sure.
But the other day I walked out, stubbed my toe real bad, wanted to say something to the effects, and I think probably everyone's had was like, "Oh, you're such an idiot," or something negative like that. And it doesn't happen very often, but the other day it slipped and I said something like in my brain, like, "Oh, why am I so dumb?" And I was like, and then I caught myself, Frank, and I said, "I'm not dumb. I need to slow down, be more present with my environment. Maybe this is just a reminder to be more present instead of being on autopilot mode." But I want to challenge our listeners today to think about I want you to think about the last time you said something detrimental to yourself in your inner voice around something you did. Could be anything. Grandiose. Could be something that you said weird at a coffee shop. Could be anything. And I want you to take the practice or the idea of saying next time you hear yourself say something negative, I want you to counter it with two positives. So I'm not saying that you have to fundamentally change your brain, but if you're going to weigh in on the pessimistic side of you and be very detrimental to your mental health, if you will, because I think that those don't lead to positive outcomes, well, then let's, like you said, also hit that with the other side of the equation, which is some positive stuff. So if you find yourself saying something negative, then just in your brain, tell yourself something two nice things. Hey, I have a really great friend in Frank, so I must be doing something right in life, right? Or
Next time you stub your toe, here's what I want you. I want you to yell out, and everybody's gonna get nuts. You're gonna be yelling out, "Wow, I feel alive right now." Like, because even something like that, it's one of the things that I do. It's like you take something. Having kids taught me this. Like, I can, in a bad situation when everything's chaos, I can come as the sergeant or I can come as the clown. And the clown worked a lot more times than the sergeant worked, to the extent that I'm now the man child. Like, that's what they call me. Like, sometimes deal with the man child. But I'm close with them. They respect me, all these things, because I chose to just not be negative in my approach to things. And positivity always has a better outcome.
And I think, and well, this could be our last one on this topic, but I think just around the idea of self-talk and mental health in general, I think it's really important to to just expose that everyone's on their own journey. I'm a big proponent, as I think you are as well, which is just like you'd get a physical trainer in the gym, getting a trainer or help for your brain is just like getting help for your muscles, and we should look at them as the same, I think, as somebody who wants just to make sure that
Absolutely.
up here, you got everything you need, and they're a proponent for your own success. Would you say that you'd agree with that statement?
What a blessing it is for my teenagers that that I have a health plan that allows them to see psychotherapists, psychologists, just like they can see a physiotherapist and a chiropractor, right? And I didn't have this growing up, right? Product of the 70s, tough it out, quit crying, work it out, man. I didn't have that. Now I can sit there and say, if this is really troubling you, one, I'm not equipped to help you. I'm an IT executive, right? I love you and I can give you my experience and my perspective. But if this is really bad, why don't we go talk to somebody? I've utilized that, not because my children have particularly big problems, because I'm not equipped to help them with some of the critical things that youth face. The best thing I can do, let's talk to the adults in the room for a minute. The best thing you can do is try to remember just how hard it was when you were picked on at school, or when you weren't doing as well academically, or when you struggled with certain things mentally. Just remember what that was like, and then say, isn't it great that now we've reduced those stigmas? Now we can get coverage for those professionals that can assist us. And whenever they come to me with something, it's like, this, like, you know what? Here's what I think. And why don't we go talk to so and so? Oh, yeah, that's a good idea, Dad. Let's go do that. And we book it. Isn't that great? It's fantastic we have that. Take advantage of those things. Absolutely. None of
Yeah,
us none of us have it figured out. It's the bane of the human existence. Is there elements about who we are that we just don't understand? And so we got to work with different tools available to us to get those things sorted. So yeah,
and
I love that we got that.
asking for help is a strength, and I think,
Yeah.
I've been coaching that in my business alone, right? Like, when my team comes and they ask for help, I'm like,
Yeah.
"That is a really mature thing of you to do," right? So I think that's the same thing in our work life. I look at that as an incredible skill set if someone brings that to my company, and then the same thing on the personal side. Asking for help is a skill.
And those with more gray hair than me, they really had trouble doing that. Now I reflect on that, and I think that's probably one of the reasons why I don't mind going to my neighbor and saying, "Hey, I need a hand with this. Can you give me a hand with this?" And he knows that at any time he can pick up the phone and call me and ask the same. And that's how we get through this thing called life, with each other's help. So I think that that's an important thing. And again, we're isolating ourselves, so we don't even have that muscle. The kids may not be developing that muscle to learn to ask for help, and they should. They should do that, and they should be willing to help others.
I think asking for help is just something that I just want to continue to and to disseminate to the youth as something that is so critical, and it'll be something that can absolutely propel your career, because in the same sense of asking for help, you're also creating community, because the person that you're asking for help is going to be more than likely willing to help you again, because they see you as somebody who's trying to grow, who's trying to get better. I'd love to, with the time we have remaining, kind of continue the conversation, but I'd love to transition it a little bit more into the nonprofit industry as we kind of talk around. So we've talked about the youth. I think it's a lot of things that don't get talked about in terms of how to set yourself up early on in your career, to run after failure, to not be afraid to ask for help. Think about who you surround yourself with. A lot of concepts I think that you and I both feel would set up somebody to take on their first initiative and take it on well and try to learn and grow and figure out if it's not for you. One of the things that's particularly important for me, and it's something that comes from just wanting to help and support the nonprofit sector in general, which is I think there is a unique opportunity for the youth to start evaluating seriously jobs in the nonprofit sector. I think too often right now, I'm mentoring a lot of youth coming out of college, and it's very exciting to look in tech and AI and to focus on some of those forward-looking, innovative spaces. But I'm a big proponent that the nonprofit space offers you something unique that's different from the commercial space. And it's because obviously, as you know, we won't get too deep on this, but nonprofit sector typically handcuffed compared to how we hold other businesses in the commercial space accountable for what they're able to do. But we ask the nonprofit sector to do the same, but with all of these regulations that limit us from being able to truly,
A
yeah.
lot of concerns and a lot of criticism in the nonprofit space. It's true, but for young people, if you want to cut your teeth on something, it's a good space to do it. You'll be given opportunity because there's always need, right? So that's one thing. There I want to. We have to balance out. Like when we're talking to young people, we got to balance out the thinking. You can get typecast. People have a perception of nonprofits. It's completely invalid. There was a board member that I heard talking the other day, and they were talking about just how nonprofits are maybe less secure against cyber, but we're not. We use the same technologies everybody else does, right? So I got to transition from the for-profit sector to nonprofit, doing all the same things. I had access to all the latest technologies, all the latest software. I got it all at a discount because we are afforded that opportunity. But at the end of the day, when I worked hard and finished my day, it wasn't for the shareholder. It wasn't for the CEO's, bottom line or his bank account. It was to help people. And so all you get the exact same stuff in medium and larger nonprofits, maybe not the small ones, but if you get into the bigger nonprofits, the big, they'll have the same requirements as any other business, except you need to be respectful of the dollars that you're spending. And I think that's a good thing, right? Not being non-wasteful is always a good thing. And you're doing it with an impact, and you get to move the needle and stuff. So if that's your MO, is to get good at something and to feel good about what you're getting good at, nonprofits are the space, you know. If your motivator is money, that's always going to be a challenge. But as per Mr. Musk, we're not going to need any money anymore. So throw that out the window. It's not that you can't make good money in nonprofits either. That's an absolute BS way of looking at things. I make a decent salary. I make very good salary, and that's because I create value that can drive those nonprofits to success. And there are people that are willing to invest in what I bring to that part of the business. So I think it's a great space for people. And I do truly believe that it's going to be the value engine in the future. Social service, nonprofit, those that are going to fill in the gaps that technology cannot fill in, whatever those gaps might be. We're still
You
going
hit
to need us. They may not need the banks or the lawyers, and or the teachers. I don't want to say that because I think there's value in the human education experience, but they're always going to need people to help people. I think that's going to be there for a long time till we become robots or whatever it is you're going to converge.
yeah, when we, morph into one
Or spin and we tap in and we evolve or whatever that ends up being. I'll be fishing. I'll just be fishing when that's happening.
I love the idea of jumping into the nonprofit space early because of all the things that you said, and also that typically they're gonna be understaffed in certain areas, which is if you're the person who's like, I'm gonna go do that. I'm gonna go fix that problem." You suddenly are changing your entire career trajectory because if you are the person who can be, almost like an octopus and you can have an arm in IT and you can do some operation stuff and you can help the fundraisers and accounting needs help with some data and you're able to do that. Nonprofits give you a unique ability to really start to see the broader perspective of how a business operates and runs, how the different departments operate, how the data flows or doesn't flow between departments effectively. I view it as like almost like a master class in understanding how business works, particularly as you said, I think let's caveat probably your larger mid-sized one or your enterprise nonprofits are going to have very
Well,
much the same.
this is something people don't forget. Like there are community nonprofits, there are state, provincial nonprofits, there are national nonprofits, international and global nonprofits. I mean, you could join the UN. It's a nonprofit organization. So this stigma or this preconceived notion of nonprofit equals charity, it doesn't, and it shouldn't. And nonprofits should and are starting to be afforded the type of money that's required to operate in the world that we live in, which comes with tech, AI, business and financial acumen, the ability to sell. Like all those things are needed by nonprofits. So if you're just tired of working for the man, go work for the nonprofit and help move the needle.
Well, and your whole world changes when the end state isn't shareholders, but it's and I talk about this often. When you get into this vibration of helping people that you will never meet in this world, there is an intrinsic thing that happens in our psychology, and I believe because you and I both know all of this is all connected into one, and if you get into that level of service, things are gonna just change in your life, and your whole perspective is going to change if you really adopt, "Hey, I'm just gonna help you
People around you too. Like, we advocate and evangelize in the smallest and largest ways to our families and our friends. And so it starts to spread, and that's part of the reason why I think this is a thing, because nonprofits are less stigmatized today than they were in the past. Young people want to have an impact, which is again something that's giving me a little bit of faith in humanity. And so if these are some of the reasons why I think it's going to become bigger than it is today, and be the value engine of the future. So
Where do you see nonprofits' ability to jump onto the AI or innovation train? Where do you see nonprofits where is their seat at the train station to take a seat and be on this innovation layer in a way that, historically, I think, there can be some very, very valid reasons to be, cautious around entering into the agentic space and what it means for your data and having an AI policy. At the highest, most grandiose level, how are you seeing nonprofits starting to think about AI as they move forward? Because this is so important for the youth who are looking at jobs in these organizations to know that they're not going to be excluded from the AI revolution that's taking place, even if you work for a nonprofit. So curious your high level thoughts there.
there's two sides to this AI coin. One is the risk for nonprofits. So if you're good at understanding risk and helping organizations navigate risk, there's always going to be a need in that sector, no matter what comes. And so on the AI side of that risk, if you're a social services organization, you have this reputational risk that you've got to protect. So you can't let AI screw that up, because you are always doing it with an element of human caution, right? And if you abandon that and something does go wrong, your funding goes away, the people that are willing to register for your programs goes away, and you cease to exist for the wrong reasons. All nonprofits want to no longer exist. That's kind of the ultimate goal, but not for the wrong reasons. But on the other side of that, where do I see it benefiting? So let's just, again, I want to put the most important thing to me first, which is accessibility and inclusion, right? So it just gives access to jobs and information and ability and community. AI will help with all that. It'll help tear down those barriers.
Uh-huh.
Cost to implement. We should see the cost to implementing solutions go down. Think about it. If you everything we use in the way of business tools is a database, a workflow engine, and a front end form, a web page today. Those three things make up just about every system we have. So really, you just have to have your data in order. So if you look at those three pillars, it's like be good at defining process, be good at understanding the importance of data, and know how to engineer your prompts. And all of a sudden, the cost to implement a solution goes down dramatically. And I think that we're starting to realize that, because we have these AIs that can just create applications. And I think we've talked about, these new models of value with AI. Maybe we're going to move to this place where I'm going to charge you based on how much more money it allowed you to raise, or how many more people it allowed you to serve, which ultimately allowed you to get more money from your funders, right? Because there's not going to be money in building the workflow and building the web, the form, or that's all going away. And we're not going to need these things anymore. We're not going to need mice anymore, So
And you've already seen multiple consulting firms with lawsuits with local and state governments by allowing AI. They're signing up big government contracts and then they're producing AI slop in 100-page documents that aren't real, right? So there is a level of risk and risk mindset that I think is really critical to take on. Always be questioning, what the output is, what the prompts are.
risk discipline
This
is huge in nonprofit spaces, and it's becoming bigger every day. And let's think about, I'm going to tie things back, right? If you have a broad mindset, if you have a broad skill set, you can contemplate risks, but
Yeah.
you have to know about a lot of different things. So when someone comes to me and says, "Hey, can you build me this agent to do X, Y, and Z?" Well, I'm thinking not about the technicality of what they're asking me to do. but about the risk to the people and the risk to the reputation, the risk, the business risk. I have to understand my insurance position. I have to understand what the board is going to challenge me on and doing. So that's the broadness that you need to have to be a risk professional, right? You can't just be somebody with narrow vision to do something like risk. But risk is actually going to be a very valuable. I think people that can analyze risk, definitely something that I'm seeing a lot more of these days. So
And is this would you say this is a fair way of summing up if you had to recommend, because a lot of nonprofit leaders are trying to figure out where to start. Where do I start to think about AI? Where do I think about enablement? Where do I think about kind of the legal side of things? Is that your recommendation is initially to think about any initiative that you want to take on from an AI, IT infrastructure perspective at a nonprofit, let's first think about the risk in all the ways that you've talked about it, not just risk technology, risk to donor experience, brand outlook. Like, do you take a risk profile when looking at what agentic solutions to move forward with? Or like help people kind of tap in if your evaluation process to thinking about, does this agentic solution make sense? What's the risk profile? I know it's a very loaded question, but I'm
the risk is part of governance, and I'm a proponent of governance. If you don't have good governance, you can't take advantage of what could come, because there's a lot of there's a lot of unseen possibility in front of us, okay? And we know that things are accelerating, which is a bit of a concern, because if it accelerates too fast, our ignorance to what's possible, the gap grows, right? So instead, I say have good governance. Do you know your data? Do you know how you're collecting it, what it is? Fine. Do you have the right protections around that data? Great. Okay. Are your people trained? Fantastic. Are your processes well defined? Are they reviewed? These are all governance things. Do you have a risk lens that you put everything through? If you have all those things in place, if you invest in that, the AI is getting easier to use, more capable. But what are you throwing it at? You're throwing it at your data, you're throwing it at your people, you're throwing it at your processes. So the risk inherently is in the governance side of things. It's not in the technology, because you have more control over the technology.
Yeah. No, incredibly important, the level of governance, thinking about it, having it structured, define what it is. It's not something that you're thinking it's something predefined and then you ebb and flow with it. It's not something that you're like you look back at and think, "Oh, maybe we should have had governance." Particularly in the AI space, that needs to be like the blueprint for the building. I'd like to talk just a little bit more around your current role in kind of some of the activities that you're doing there, because it's it's pretty impactful the work that you're doing at March of Dimes, Canada, and it just in general the ripple effect that you have had in your career, Frank, is something that none of us can it's hard to quantify, right? Because like you talked about, you put these ripples and then other people pick up on your energy and your vibration and they carry that out. And there's people who you've never met who have been benefited from the work that you do on a day-to-day basis.
I hope so.
So I think that's pretty special. Both at the Canadian National Institution for the Blind and now March of Dimes Canada, your work has emphasized embedding accessibility directly into digital strategy
Yeah.
instead of treating it as a separate initiative. And I think that accessibility, particularly for those who need it more than ever, is something where technology is no longer the barrier, right? So we can't lean on tech. What'd you say?
Controversy is no longer the
Okay,
barrier.
let's talk about it. Tell me your thought.
No, there's still work to be done. We're consumed with AI, right? But there's all this tech out there that is still out there that we still use. You still go to a website to buy stuff, right? And if it's not accessible, it's not accessible. So there's this retrofit factor that I think AI is going to solve the problem too. Yeah, one of the biggest things for AI is this notion that it will retrofit the internet for those with disabilities. Especially with that comes a lot out of the blind and low vision space. No longer do I have to worry about all the bad websites that were poorly coded or not coded for accessibility. AI is going to surface what I need from those websites without me having to deal with the UI. So that's aces. But and not everybody understands accessibility and what that means. So if you're interested in that, you need to understand that first. You need to have a fundamental understanding of some of those things. There's some great resources out there. Some of them, things like the web accessibility standards. I wonder if there's going to be relevance to that in the new world, because I think we're going to leave this idea of web pages behind eventually. But understanding accessibility in its purest form is important. It helps you understand a little bit more about a lot of people that exist out there that you just don't see every day, but they are there and they do have value, and they and we need to elevate them. We need to get them, out of where they are if they want to. The other thing is disability is very difficult to define. This is something that's very profound to me as I've moved from like an organization that's focused on people with vision loss versus an organization that is pan disability. How do you define disability? And so designing for inclusion is incredibly challenging. But the reward when you get it right is, and this is what I found now, 15 years in this space, is that when you get it right, it benefits everybody. Like accessible is for everybody. Inclusion is for everybody. And so if people want to get into design, be it physical design or digital design or whatever the case is, if you intentionally learn about accessible design and inclusive design, if you're building products, you're going to have a competitive advantage. People will naturally say, oh, wow, this is so much easier. Product B is so much easier to use than product A. Why? Because it was built for everybody, right? So that's apparent, that's evident, that's profound in what I've learned over the years.
Okay, so technology, while it's come a long way, what I'm hearing you say too is we still have a little bit of a ways to go to truly hit on accessibility in a way that means accessibility for all the different types of people who are out there, regardless of what their disability may be. We still have a few layers to go before we truly remove that barrier of access to all the information that we
Yeah,
all.
and there's still, I mean, think about prompting, like voice prompting, right? There are people with speech impediments that the interfaces that allow them to interface with their speech, they've got to get better at personalization. So that's be training elements that allow that technology to learn about me and how I speak, right? That's critical. And the same thing comes like from a learning perspective. We talk about neurodiversity. Sometimes I wonder what is non-neurodiversity. I mean, we're all wired a bit differently. Our technology is going to get to a place where it will learn about how I learn best.
The value that people with disabilities have to give to this world are we still haven't tapped fully into that, and it's the reason why you said something that made me think of this story is they said, "Yeah, so we go around and we're building building chips, or we're putting, goods in boxes and we're shipping them out." And one thing we learned is like, "Hey, there could be pallets on the floor." So now we have a blue flag that goes in to make sure that everyone knows a pallet's coming up. And they were like, "You know what? We did that everywhere." Because everyone benefits when we do that. And so by one accessibility or thing that we did to help somebody who had a disability ended up being something that made sense for everybody. And that was this wild connection moment for me.
Build for accessibility, build for inclusion. I don't care what lens you want to apply to it. It's either social responsibility, competitive advantage, just a better product or service.
That leads to our last question, Frank, that I wanted to ask you. What has you in your seat today optimistic around where the nonprofit sector is going? Like if you had a crystal ball and your optimistic hat on, what does the next 5 to 10 years look like? And how does this space going to evolve? And I know this is a very difficult question.
It really depends on what we decide to do. I think it depends on what the majority of people, come together to see as an outcome. I think I've answered your question in that we have the potential to be the value engine when everything else, all that was constructed on this concept of money, and sort of products and services that are no longer going to be something that we have to afford or can afford, potentially negatively. So what becomes important? People helping people, people closing gaps, people making life better. And so that is my prediction for nonprofits. But it's not only my prediction, it's my call to action. Like let's demand a place where we value how we've made this place better, as opposed to valuing the things that have only made it worse.
Very well said, Frank, and very beautifully articulated. And I agree. You did answer the question kind of throughout the entire podcast here today. And look, I just want to take the last 30 seconds here and just say thank you for your time and your energy and your focus. I think
Thanks, man.
you and I both have an optimistic view of the future. And I think I agree with you. We're at a unique opportunity right now when the youth have all the power now. They have all the means. We were held back by certain things that tools we didn't have.
Yeah.
Now we have the tools. This be a moment to galvanize and to inspire the youth to say, if I'm going to apply to a job in the commercial sector, let me give the nonprofit sector a chance to show up and show what they have to offer because you can truly change the world in a more grandiose way than maybe was ever afforded to an individual historically.
Young people are a mass of potential in time and energy and open thinking. You know, what do you want to do with that potential? Don't squander it.